The New York Times just released their 30 Greatest Living American Songwriters, and two of the names on it are Romeo Santos and Bad Bunny, the only two Latino artists on the entire list. Two men who built their entire careers in Spanish. Two men who the industry at various points quietly expected to eventually cross over, translate, adapt, soften, and make themselves easier to digest for an English-speaking mainstream audience. They never did, and they both ended up on the New York Times Greatest Songwriters list anyway. Shh, turn the volume up, but keep it low. This is Rap Deepest Secrets, the one place the labels can't control, exposing the codes, the cover-ups, the real cost of fame. Now, back to the video. Let that sit for a second, because that is not just a feel-good headline, that is a verdict, and verdicts have context. For a very long time, and this is not conspiracy, this is documented industry reality, there was an unspoken rule operating at the center of the global music business. If you wanted to be taken seriously beyond your region, if you wanted the big stages, the major label investment, the mainstream cultural recognition, the kind of legacy that got you on lists like this one, you had to make certain adjustments. You had to meet the English-speaking world where it was. You had to translate, not just your language necessarily, but your sound, your references, your cultural specificity. You had to sand down the edges that made you you and replace them with edges that made you marketable. That was the deal. It was not written anywhere, nobody said it out loud in polite company, but it existed, and it shaped the careers of artists across generations who either accepted it, resisted it quietly, or burned out trying to fight it without the platform to win. And then Bad Bunny showed up, and did not read the memo, or read it, understood it completely, and threw it directly in the trash. Not subtly, not diplomatically, just ignored it entirely. At first, the industry watched with the kind of cautious interest they reserve for anomalies. A Spanish-language artist moving numbers that did not make sense on paper? Okay, viral moment, playlist love, probably a crossover coming. That is usually how the story goes. You get the Latin artist's hits on the English pop radar, you get the feature with the American superstar, you get the remix, and then you get the full pivot. Clean, predictable, industry approved. Except the crossover never came, because he never needed one. The world crossed to him instead. And that, right there, is where the story stops being a music story and starts being something much bigger. Because when the world crosses to you, when millions of people who do not speak your language, who did not grow up in your culture, who have never set foot in Puerto Rico, choose to stream your music, buy your concert tickets, and feel your words in their chest even without fully understanding them, that is not a marketing strategy. That is power. A specific, rare, almost inexplicable kind of power that the industry does not have a formula for because it was never built inside their formula in the first place. Bad Bunny did not just drop music over the years. He kept shifting lanes like he was genuinely bored of winning one game at a time. Reggaeton, Latin trap, dembow, rock influences, regional Mexican sounds, not as gimmicks, not as strategic genre experiments designed to capture new markets, but as a naturally restless creative moving through whatever he felt like moving through and trusting that the audience would follow. And every single time the conversation shifted to, okay, this is probably the peak, he moved the ceiling again. Quietly, almost casually, like someone who does not actually believe in ceilings. Then came Debí tirar más fotos, and this is where everything gets interesting and uncomfortable, because Debí tirar más fotos was not a commercial album by any conventional definition. It was not engineered for radio. It was not built to capture a demographic or dominate a streaming algorithm or check a box on a label's quarterly target sheet. It was an album about memory, about regret, about culture, specifically Puerto Rican culture, with all its specificity and complexity and history intact, about the quiet, creeping fear of losing where you come from while you are busy chasing where you are going. Traditional sounds like plena and salsa were not used as background texture or nostalgic decoration. They were the foundation, the structural core, the thing the entire emotional architecture of the album was built on. This was not a commercial calculation. This was the opposite of a commercial calculation. This was an artist at the peak of his global power, choosing to go more specific, more rooted, more culturally particular, at exactly the moment when every conventional industry instinct would have told him to go broader, safer, and more universally digestible. And it dominated anyway, critically, culturally, commercially. Which raises a question that the industry has been very carefully avoiding since it happened. What does that mean? Not just for Bad Bunny, but for everything the industry thought it understood about how global success works, who gets to define it, and what the rules actually are. Because here's the part that doesn't get said clearly enough. The standard story the music business tells about artists like Bad Bunny is the hard work pays off story, the inspiring, clean, universally applicable narrative where talent plus persistence plus the right moment equals success. It's a good story. It makes everyone feel good. It suggests the system is fair and the formula is replicable. Except it's not, and Bad Bunny's success is actually evidence against that story, not for it. He did not succeed by working within the system. He succeeded by refusing it so completely and so consistently that the system eventually had to restructure itself around him. That's not a blueprint. That's not something you can teach in a masterclass or replicate by following steps. That is a once-in-a-generation collision of talent, specificity, timing, and a kind of cultural authenticity that cannot be manufactured because the moment you try to manufacture it, it disappears.
What translated was not the language. What translated was the truth behind it. And truth, real, unfiltered, this is exactly who I am truth, does not need a translation. It transmits directly. That is not a romantic idea. That is actually what happened. Millions of people who could not understand every word felt every word anyway, because the emotional honesty underneath them was that precise. Now, Romeo Santos. Because Bad Bunny gets the majority of the contemporary conversation, and that is understandable given where he is right now in his career. But Romeo Santos being on this list is its own separate and significant story, one that deserves to be told without getting swallowed by the bigger headline. Romeo Santos built his legacy in a genre, bachata, that for a long time was not even taken seriously within Latin music circles, let alone outside of them. Bachata was the music of the margins, the music of Dominican immigrants, of working-class communities, of people whose cultural expressions were consistently treated as less sophisticated, less worthy of prestige, less deserving of the kind of critical recognition that this New York Times list represents. And Romeo Santos took that music, that specific, rooted, culturally particular music, and turned it into something that filled arenas across the world. He did not elevate bachata by changing it. He elevated it by believing in it completely and executing at such a high level that the world had to follow. Two artists, two completely different paths, the same fundamental truth underneath both of them. You do not become global by erasing where you come from. You become global by going deeper into where you come from, until the depth itself becomes the point of entry for everyone else. And this, right here, this exact conversation, this level of analysis on stories that the 30-second take cannot do justice to, is exactly why you need to be subscribed to this channel right now. Not later, right now. Because this is what we built this space for. The stories underneath the stories. The questions that the headline does not ask. The conversations that matter past the moment. Hit that subscribe button. You will want to be here for what comes next. Now, back to the twist. Because there is one, and it is sitting right in the middle of this entire celebration, waiting to be acknowledged. The New York Times naming Romeo Santos and Bad Bunny to this list is genuinely significant and genuinely worth celebrating. It is institutional recognition of something that fans, communities, and honest critics have known for years, that these artists are not just commercially successful, they are great. They are craftsmen, they are writers. They belong in the conversation with the best of any genre or generation.
But here is the uncomfortable question that lives right next to the celebration. Why are they the only Latino artists on a list of 30? Not the only ones who deserved consideration, but the only two who made it. In a country with an enormous and growing Latino population, with a history of Latin music that runs deep and long and rich across multiple genres and generations, with artists who have been producing world-class songwriting for decades, two names. Is that representation, or is it a quota that feels like progress while still being a ceiling? Because the same industry that is now comfortable putting Bad Bunny and Romeo Santos on a Greatest Living American Songwriters list is the same industry that spent years treating Spanish-language music as a regional product, a niche market, a secondary consideration. The recognition is real, the celebration is earned, but the context does not disappear just because the headline feels good. The question worth asking is not just, did they make the list? The question is, what took so long, who else belongs here, and what does it mean that the institution gets to decide when the recognition arrives? Those are not comfortable questions, but they are honest ones, and honest questions are more useful than comfortable answers. Romeo Santos and Bad Bunny are on the New York Times Greatest Living American Songwriters list. They belong there, completely and without qualification. And the conversation about who else belongs there and why the list looks the way it does is one that is not going away. If you made it all the way here, you are exactly the kind of person this channel was built for. Subscribe, stay locked in, and we will keep having the conversations that go deeper than the surface, the real ones. See you in the next video.